Andre Tippett from 1982 to 1993 had 100 sacks. Only player with 100. Julius Adams from 1971 to 1987 had 80.5. Top two. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and I am going to be continuing a review of every team in the NFL. We started with the AFC East, and we're going to wrap that division up this episode. Unfortunately, for the New England Patriots, they're the last one that I'm going to be reviewing for this one. And the way I've been doing it is going from first to last. So for the New England Patriots this year, they ended up in last place in their division. They finished the 2024 season at 4 wins, 13 losses. They were 2-6 at home, 2-7 on the road, and 2-4 in the division. As I've been listening to other podcasts, all I've heard is great things about the draft picks, the free agents that were signed. So it'll be interesting to watch the New England Patriots going into 2025. So how does the team from 2024 compare to past Patriot teams and players? That's what we're going to find out on this episode of Just the Stats NFL. And we'll start with the coaches. And obviously, there's really only one coach that is on the top of this list. That's Bill Belichick, who from 2000 to 2023 had 266 wins. The next coach was Mike Holovac from 1961 to 1968 with 52. So, like I said, nobody's on this list other than Bill Belichick, really. So with Mike Vrabel being the new head coach for the New England Patriots, he has an opportunity to move right up the list all the way to second. And then it'd be years and years and years if he stays with the team before he ever catch Bill Belichick, which not impossible, but highly improbable. But we'll see. But he easily could move up into the second position if he can have a good team and be consistent and year in, year out for a few years. So that's your coach. Let's look at the offensive players, and we'll start with the quarterbacks. And again, you got one guy far and above, and we're going to see this in every passing category probably. But Tom Brady, from 2000 to 2019, had 74,571 yards passing. That leads the Patriots. Drew Bledsoe was second from 1993 to 2001 with 29,657. And Steve Grogan third with 26,886. He was from 1975 to 1990. So really, Drew Bledsoe and Steve Grogan's numbers wouldn't be bad on other teams. But when you're on a team where your quarterback was Tom Brady, they pale in comparison. Drake May, already 15th with his 2,276 yards. So we'll see what happens with him. Obviously, he has a chance to move up this list quite a ways. Move up into the top 10 easily. Next year, he definitely will if he has any kind of a season at all. If he has 4,000 yards, he'll definitely move up to at least number 8. So, and then after that, it'll be a little bit of a work. Mac Jones is number 7 with 8,918 yards. That would be somebody that Drake May could pass, not this year, but next year. When we look at TDs, again, Tom Brady, 541, Steve Grogan, 182, Drew Bledsoe, 166. Those are your top quarterbacks as far as TD goes. Drake May is already 13th with 15 touchdowns, and that's not bad. First season, 12 games, or 13 games that he played. So Jim Plunkett's number 5 with only 62. So in a few years, he could definitely move up to the 5th spot. But this is be a category. We'll watch Drake May as he plays and see how he does. When it comes to interceptions, Tom Brady does not lead in this category, which is a category you don't want to lead in anyway. Steve Grogan does. He had 208 interceptions. Tom Brady was second with 179, but played so many more years than Steve Grogan did. And as I've mentioned in every podcast so far, when I'm talking about interceptions, you see in the older players from the past, the interception percentage rate is much higher. So Steve Grogan threw an interception at a 5.8% rate, whereas Tom Brady threw an interception at a 1.8% rate. Huge difference. That's just the way the NFL is. But even 5.8% is a little bit high for that time period. So those are your top two quarterbacks as far as interceptions go. And then as far as quarterbacks from last year, Drake May had 10 interceptions. And so not too bad. When you look at the rate that he was throwing him at, 3.0% interception rate. And he'll improve on that. As just being a rookie, you're going to expect in his rookie year that he would throw a lot of interceptions. Interestingly, Jacoby Brissett only threw one interception in the games that he played. So those are your leaders in interceptions. And the last category we'll look at, which is another category you don't want to be leading in, and that's sacks. But Tom Brady does lead that sack, and this is a huge number. 500 times Tom Brady was sacked in his career. But again, played for so many years, well over 20 years, and you can expect a lot of sacks, but 500 is a lot. Drew Bledsoe was second with 262, and Steve Grogan had 247. And Tom Brady was sacked at a 4.8% rate. Drew Bledsoe at 5.5 and Steve Grogan at 6.4. So even despite the fact that he wasn't sacked quite at the same rate as those other two, he still had 500. Whereas Drake May had 34 sacks. But, and this is something that'll definitely need to be improved, that was at a 9.1% rate. That's just too high. You do not want to see your quarterback get sacked that many times. That put him at number 15 as far as quarterbacks go. So that's just too many times. But we should see an improvement with all the changes and the upgrades that the Patriots made this past offseason. All right, let's look at the running backs. Now, here's a category where you could see somebody current move up this list, and you do see that. Sam Cunningham, who played from 1973 to 1982, leads the New England Patriots as far as rushing yards with 5,453. Jim Nantz, from 1965 to 1971, had 5,323. The only two players over 5,000 yards. Other teams have players over 10,000. So this is definitely a place where you're going to see some improvement or some movement up the ladder. And in fact, Ramondre Stevenson already has 3,066. He's number 9 on the list. So we'll see what kind of season he has this year. But he definitely is somebody who could make an impact. When it comes to rushing TDs, Jim Nantz, again, 45 touchdowns rushing. Sam Cunningham had 43. Only two players over 40 rushing touchdowns. So Stevenson has 21, which puts him in 12th position. So those are your running backs. But a lot of opportunity here for running backs to make a movement up this list. All right, let's look at the wide receivers. And despite some of the names you've had in the past with them, like Randy Moss, for example, Stanley Morgan is the top receiver as far as yards go. But let's look at the receptions first. Wes Welker had 672 receptions. Julian Edelman had 620 receptions. And then Troy Brown had 557. So Wes Welker played from 2007 to 2012, and Julian Edelman was 2009 and 2020. Had Brady throwing him all those passes. Good players. Stanley Morgan was fourth with only 534. But the difference is the top three all average just around 11 yards per reception, where Stanley Morgan in his career from 1977 to 1989 averaged 19.4 yards per reception. That's an incredible amount of yards per reception for an entire career. You don't see players in the season have that kind of a number. So when it does come to yards, that's where Stanley Morgan is the number one. And by a large margin, despite not being anything but the fourth best as far as receptions go. So Stanley Morgan had 10,352 yards receiving. Rob Gronkowski was second with 7,861, and he played from 2010 to 2018. And then you had Wes Welker, who led with receptions, but is third as far as yards go with 7,459. So those are your top three. And so you have a lot of opportunity for receivers as well. Hunter Henry has 2,205 yards, tight end. The leading tight end coming in at number 7 was Ben Coates from 1991. Actually, I should stop right there. That can't be true when you have Rob Gronkowski on the team. He's actually, like I said, the number 2 as far as yards go, and the number 1 tight end with 7,861. And obviously, he's also the leading tight end for as far as receptions go. So it's a long ways. Hunter Henry has 199 receptions and 2,205 yards. So long way to go for a tight end. And he was the best from 2024. So we'll see how that goes from here on out. Now, when it comes to touchdown, Rob Gronkowski again was 79. A decent lead over Stanley Morgan, who had 67. Like I said, Randy Moss just didn't play enough. He has single season numbers that are pretty good, but he ended up with 50, tied for third with Ben Coates, tight end as well. So I've seen some teams where the tight end just isn't even a factor. But for New England Patriots, plays an important role on the team. All right. When it comes to running backs, James White, as far as touchdowns go, from 2014 to 2021, had 25 receiving touchdowns. So pretty good player out of the backfield. But moving on to the defense, and starting with sacks, category that I left out in the previous 3 episodes, but definitely want to have those in here. Andre Tippett from 1982 to 1993 had 100 sacks, only player with 100. Julius Adams from 1971 to 1987 had 80.5. Top 2. Now, this is a number that you would think could be broken. Dietrich Wise, who's been on the team in 2024, has 34 sacks. So a long ways for a current player to reach that number of 100. So you'll have to hang out on the team long enough, play more than just one contract worth with a team before you're going to get to 100 sacks. But there's a big drop-off. Top 4, Willie McGinnis had 78 and Tony McGee had 77. Then there's a drop down to 53.5. So you could see somebody get up there if they have a decent amount of sacks for several years, 10 or more for a few years. You could see somebody get to at least the 5th position. When we're looking at interceptions, as I've mentioned, this is a category that's very tough. Usually you see players more so from the past years, from the 20th century. But for the New England Patriots, you do have Ty Law from 1995 to 2004 with 36. And then Devin McCourty from 2010 to 2022 had 35. He's one of the few players you're going to see at the top of a list who's played this late into his career. And then J.C. Jackson also, 2018 to 2023 had 25. A lot of teams, you just don't see that. You see players from the 1960s, 70s, that kind of a number. So Ty Law, Raymond Claiborne, who played from 1977 to 1989, both have 36 interceptions as a career for the New England Patriots. So those are your top two currently. And like I said, right now, 2024, Jonathan Jones has 11. 2016 to 2024. So he won't get anywhere near that number of 36. All right, one other category you want to look at is tackles for loss as far as the defense goes. Willie McGinnis now led this category with 79 tackles for loss. And then Richard Seymour had 64. Those are your top two. Kind of having a little overlapping. Willie McGinnis, 1994 to 2005, and Richard Seymour, 2001 to 2008. Believe it or not, coming in at number 3 was Mike Vrabel, the coach now. He had 55 tackles for loss. So definitely good defensive player when he was playing. Now the head coach. So that'll be fun to watch this year with him being the head coach and the kind of attitude he brings to the game. So as far as current players, last year, Dietrich Wise from 2017 to 2024 had 34 tackles for loss. So again, nowhere near the top of this list. So it'll be a while. Kyle Duggar, though, 2020 to 2024. He's another one with 25, so a little bit farther behind. So it'll be a while before you see somebody on the current team that's going to get near the top 3 or 4 players as far as that goes. All right. Moving from career stats to single season records. Let's look at that. So last year, Drake May had 2,276 yards. Jacoby Brissett had 826. So obviously, Drake May is not going to be anywhere up near the top of this list as far as yards passed in a season. But with that 2,276, he did come in 46. So like I said, not too high on the list. And as you would expect, just like when you're looking at the Miami Dolphins, you have Tom Brady just maxing out the top of this list. And in fact, out of the top 15 spots, he has 12 of them, top 5, and then so forth. In 2011, Tom Brady threw for 5,235 yards. Now, that's one of the highest marks you're going to see in the NFL ever. So that'll be tough for Drake May to ever catch. So like I said, Tom Brady had the top 5. Drew Bledsoe in 1994 had the 6th spot with 4,555 yards. He's the only other quarterback other than Tom Brady, even in the top 15. He's up there 3 times, but still, it's just dominated by Tom Brady when it comes to yards. And it's going to be the same in every category. When we're looking at TDs, Tom Brady had a season with 50, which by far was his best season. That was 2007. 2011, he had 39, so big drop-off. But 50 and 39, top 2. And again, same thing. Doesn't happen until Bay Perilli, 1964, for the Boston Patriots, had 31 touchdowns. Those are the top 8 spots, the only ones over 30 touchdowns in a season. So that's a category where you could see Drake May make a little bit of a better movement. He had 15 in his season last year, so not too bad. 13 games, 15 in his rookie season. That put him at number 45 as far as TDs go. So something to look forward to. When Tom Brady threw those 50 touchdowns. He had an 8.7% rate for throwing touchdowns. That was his highest by far. When he threw 39, he had a 6.4%. So you can see a huge difference. That was a really big year for him as far as touchdowns and yardage goes. Wasn't his most yards, but still it was a pretty good season. So interceptions in a season, now this is a category where you will not see Tom Brady anywhere near the top. But Bay Purley, again in 1964, when he threw the 31 touchdowns, he threw 27 interceptions, which was tied with Drew Bledsoe from 1994 when he threw 27. And again, this is a category where you don't see anybody from the 21st century until Tom Brady in 2002 when he threw 14. But that put him at number 30 on the list. So it's just dominated mostly by the 60s. And that's, as I said before, due to the rule changes and so forth. But Drew Bledsoe was able to pop up there in 1994 with his 27 to tie for the lead. Again, you won't even see Drake May get up there as a rookie or even in the second year, throw that many interceptions. In fact, he only threw 10, which would put him at 53rd on the list. So that's a category you do not want to be on. And same with quarterback sacks in a season. Tony Eason was sacked 59 times in 1984, and then Drew Bledsoe in that again in 1999. Drew Bledsoe was sacked 55 times. Those are your top two players as far as sacks go. Most Tom Brady was ever sacked was 41 times. So not nearly the amount of beating that Drew Bledsoe took and Tony Eason took. And then as far as Drake May goes, he was sacked 34 times, which is a few too many. Not as bad as some of the other quarterbacks we'll look at. When we go back to the yardage, like I said, Drake May only had 2,276 yards. And when you look at 2024, that didn't put him too far up the list. But again, he didn't play the whole season. So he ended up at number 24 in the NFL with those yards. Joe Burrow was first with 4,918 yards. And when you're looking at touchdowns, again, it was Joe Burrow with 43 touchdowns, which would have put him second on the list as far as touchdowns for the New England Patriots. But he had 43. Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson each had 41. And like I said, Drake May had 15, which tied him for 23rd. But, you can expect that when he didn't play a full season. And that's playing against some quarterbacks that did play the full season. But when you get that far down the list, often you see they missed several games or didn't start, whatever. So we'll see how well he does this coming year. And then the same with sacks. This is where I was saying Drake May was sacked half the amount of times Caleb Williams was. Caleb Williams was sacked 68 times, whereas Drake May was sacked 34. So Caleb Williams took a tremendous abuse for the Chicago Bears, and hopefully they improve that for their team. But as far as Drake May goes, he's got an improved line, I believe, coming in, and I don't see him even playing a full season necessarily getting 34 sacks. When it came to interceptions again for the last season, it was Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins both had 16. So they led the league. Drake May had 10, coming in at 16th, tied with Gardner Minshew. So those are your leaders in passing, yardage, and so forth. Let's look at the rushing single season record. And this, you have a variety of players on this list. Corey Dillon in 2004 rushed for 1,635 yards. Curtis Martin in 1995 rushed for 1,487 yards. Impressive. And then Jim Nantz had 1,458 in 1966. So obviously, he held the record for quite a while, 29 years before Curtis Martin broke it. And then 9 years later, Corey Dillon broke it. So it's been a while, 21 years since the record was set by Corey Dillon. So we'll see what some of these running backs can do for the New England Patriots. Stevenson in 2024 had 801 yards, which put him at 34th. So really, this is an area where you could see some drastic improvement coming, hopefully, for the New England Patriots, if you're a fan of their team. And so when you look at rushing yards in the entire NFL last year, Saquon Barkley had 2,005, and Derrick Henry for the Baltimore had 1,921. Those are your top two players by a long shot. No one's really close. Stevenson finished near the bottom of the league at number 26. So definitely an area where improvements needed for the New England Patriots. When it comes to rushing touchdowns, LeGarrette Blount in 2016 had 18 rushing touchdowns. That's a big number. Damian Harris in 2021 had 15. Curtis Martin in 1995 had 14. And he also had 14 in 1996. So those are your top four as far as touchdowns in a single season. And then last year, Stevenson had 7, which put him at number 30, or actually, number 30. So again, you just see it's an area of weakness currently for the Patriots. We'll see how they do this year. In this past season, Derrick Henry, Jamar Gibbs for Detroit, James Cook for Buffalo, all had 16 touchdowns rushing. So they led the league. Josh Jacobs for Green Bay had 15. So those are your top players. Stevenson tied for 19th with his 7th. So toward the bottom of the middle of the pack, as far as that goes, as far as rushing touchdowns go. All right, let's look at one more category, and that's receiving in a single season. And Wes Welker holds the top 5 spots in this category. 2009, he had 123 receptions. 2011, he had 122. And you go down the list, the only other two players that recorded 100 or more were Julian Edelman, who did it twice. In 2013, he had 105 receptions. And in 2019, he had 100 receptions. And then Troy Brown in 2001 had 101 receptions. So those are your top 8 players as far as receptions goes. The only ones that had 100 or more receptions in a season. For 2024, again, down year as far as the New England Patriots go in receptions by any individual player. But the best was Demario Douglas, who had 66, which put him only at number 44, tied with Hunter Henry also, who had 66. So those two led the Patriots last year, but not with that many receptions. So when you look at who had the most receptions in the entire league, it was Jamar Chase, who had 127. So basically almost double Hunter Henry and Douglas. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 115, and Brock Bowers and Terry McBride, 2 tight ends, had 112 and 111 respectively. So those were your top wide receivers as far as receptions go. And with those 66, that put the 2 Patriots way down the list, tied for 39th. So not even, you have 32 a team, so not even making the top 32. So you've got backups or second string wide receivers beating out some of the New England Patriots. So obviously the offense needs some work. And I think with Drake May as the quarterback. We'll see it in the year 2025. All right, let's look at receiving yards. Wes Welker led the New England Patriots with 1,569 yards, which he did in 2011. Randy Moss was second in 2007 when he had 1,493 yards. And then Stanley Morgan in 1986 had 1,491 yards. So you see Stanley Morgan had the record for 21 years, that is, until Randy Moss came along and broke it by only 2 yards. But then 4 years later, Wes Welker broke that record and now currently stands at the top of the New England Patriots list of receivers as far as yards go. This past season, as far as yards go, Hunter Henry led the New England Patriots. Tight end had 674 yards. Demario Douglas had 621. Those are your top two. So way back there as far as that goes. I mean, they're so far down the list, it's not even funny, even just for the New England Patriots. Hunter Henry, with that amount of yardage, finished 98th. So this is definitely an area where the New England Patriots need to see some improvement. And so when you compare that to what the players in the NFL did in 2024, Jamar Chase had 1,708 yards. Justin Jefferson for Minnesota had 1,533. Those are your top two players. So just much farther than anybody from the New England Patriots. So Hunter Henry had 674 yards, which put him at 53rd. There's 32 teams, and he came in at 53rd. So you have not only number one receivers, but number two and number three receivers probably beating the best receivers that the New England Patriots had. So there's an area where they need a drastic improvement. When it comes to touchdowns, receiving, Demario Douglas had 3, Austin Hooper had 3, and Kayshon Boutte had 3. Those are your leading touchdown receivers last year. But when you look at the record, Randy Moss, and this is one of the best overall in the entire NFL, had 23 touchdown receptions in 2007. That is a ton of touchdowns receiving. Rob Gronkowski had 17 in 2011, and Randy Moss again in 2009 had 13. So those are your top three. So nobody obviously came close with only 3 receiving touchdowns. When you're looking at touchdowns in the entire NFL, Jamar Chase, who had the triple crown in receiving, had 17. Terry McLaurin had 13. So Randy Moss with 23. That's an exceptional amount of touchdowns. 16 games is, almost 1.5 per game. So those are your New England Patriots. Obviously, some areas that they can improve, and I expect to see it coming into this next season with all the positive comments I've heard on other podcasts. Like I said, you can look for an exciting year. I do think that it's likely that the Buffalo Bills win the division again, but I think it's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be really interesting to see which teams can move up into the second place position in the AFC East, especially between the New England Patriots and the New York Jets. And I just don't know what to think about Miami Dolphins, but we'll see as the season plays itself out. Next podcast, we'll be covering the AFC North division. And just like I did with this past division, we'll start with the first place team and work our way down from there. So that means next podcast, we'll be talking about the Baltimore Ravens on Just the Stats NFL podcast. So one of the things I enjoy about these podcasts and talking about these teams is just the fact that we hear these stats, and, when you're listening to your favorite team and you hear the stats, you can then watch the games and see if anybody can approach those numbers that you see. And as the season goes along, I'll keep up on that. And when I report in during the season, as the games are being played, I'll let you know where some of your players are standing, if they're moving up the list anywhere. And we don't talk about the single game records, but we will during the season if any player from your favorite team does something where he shows up on a single game record level, like in the top 10 or so, I'll bring it up, as well as bringing up stats that I didn't cover tonight in this podcast. But when I do see a record broken in some stat, no matter what it is, I'll try to report it during the season when I'm talking about the games as they're being played. I hope you enjoyed this discussion about the greatest Patriot players, and I hope you continue to listen. Please subscribe to this podcast. I really appreciate it. It really helps as I try to grow this podcast. So this is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So until next time, tschüss.